Welcome to the Dialed In Angling Podcast, presented by Strike Master Augers, Onyx Fish, St. Croix Rods, and the Minnesota DNR Ice Safety. This week, we've got a ton to talk about. My mind is definitely geared towards open water here. I know a lot of the listeners that went to the Northwest Sports Show last weekend, found out about the Mille fishing regulations as it pertains to open water. I know I was excited to hear about the regulations. On the podcast this week, we've had him before. It's Greg Berg, Mille Area Supervisor of the Minnesota DNR. Greg, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem, Tony. It's good to be back.
Hey, we met in the meetings. I'm on the Mille board, if you will, for Mille, and the last few years, obviously with different regulation changes, things shifting. This year, there's a great outlook for the lake. We talked about the perch populations being back, the bait fish populations being back. The DNR set regulations for Mille Lake, which are encouraging if you like harvesting walleyes. Greg, can you kind of run through not only the regulation, but how everything kind of came together over the last few weeks?
Yeah, sure. Each year it's kind of a process getting the Mille regulation out, but just given the shape that the lake was in, based on our netting results and the forage and things like that, that we found from our netting last year, we were able to, offer the anglers a few different options. And one of those options was a regulation that allowed people to keep two fish. And one of those fish could be over 20 inches and the other one could be between 17 and 20 inches. Alternatively, you could have two between 17 and 20. So that was the regulation that eventually, got the most support. And that's what we decided to go over. And we're excited to be able to give the anglers the opportunity to harvest to start the season.
Yeah, you and I talked, I think back in January, sometime when we filmed Dialed In Angling out on Mille perch fishing. You and I discussed sort of the bait fish boom that we're seeing on the lake right now, and it's great to see. For a number of years, I was worried about the amount of bait fish we had on Mille, meaning the amount of yellow perch, the amount of tullibees, the amount of shiners, and just as a guide and someone who spends a ton of time on Mille Lake, there just really wasn't a lot of bait in the lake. And so therefore you saw catch rates that were extremely high. You saw very little bait fish anywhere you went. That's not the case anymore. And now we are seeing the bait fish come back. I know with me using underwater cameras almost all winter, just because we were chasing perch a lot, and underwater camera use is just so much easier for a lot of customers to catch perch. But even on some of those days where those big jumbo perch are biting really light, it's nice to be able to use the camera to detect the bite, if you will. And I was so surprised at the amount of bait I saw. Young of the year perch that were in that 3 to 5 inch range, tullibees that were in that 4, 5, 6 inch range, to spot tail shiners going by. This is something that I personally haven't seen on Mille for well over 10 years, maybe even more. I would say 2007 to 2009 time period is when I remember bait fish being everywhere in the lake. We're starting to see that now. And that bodes well for the health of the fishery. I think catch rates are going to be down a little bit, but people are going to experience coming to Mille and harvesting fish. That's going to be intriguing for people. I think you're going to get an uptick in anglers coming out to the lake, especially on opener and at least for the first month of the season. Is that kind of what you guys are thinking from a DNR's perspective?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail right on the head there, Tony. Forage numbers were depressed there for quite a few years, and we've had a big uptake in the young of the year tullibee and the young of the year perch and the perch population in general. So that does really bode well for the health of the lake. We could see it just in the condition of the predators out there over the course of the summer last year. They started off the year, biting pretty good, but maybe still a little underconditioned, a little on the skinny side. And then as the summer progressed, and they started being able to feed on those tullibees and perch, they really started to plump up and had a really nice condition factor by the end of the year. But of course, that meant a slower bite and lower catch rates. So there's still a lot of forage out there. We seen a pretty slow bite for walleye over the course of the winter. I mean, there were some people finding them in pockets, here and there, but overall the walleye bite was pretty slow, and we didn't harvest a lot of pounds over the winter, under 2,000 pounds actually. So looking forward to the open water season here, we would expect that to stay pretty low just because of the forage in the lake. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to go out there and catch fish, because obviously, May and June are probably the best months in a typical year to fish Mille Lacs. So I have a feeling anglers will be able to find some to keep, but they might not just be jumping in the boat like they do some years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I just know last fall, this winter, bites got a lot tougher. And when you did catch the fish, they were beautiful. They were as healthy as I can remember Mille Lacs walleyes being. Coming
Yeah.
from an angler that fishes all over, I get to fish Leech, Mille Lacs, Winnie, Lake of the Woods, Devil's Lake. I love walleye fishing in a lot of different locations. I would say right now, the Mille Lacs walleyes are right up there with some of the healthiest fisheries in the state, in the Midwest. I would say bait fish populations are right up there from what I'm seeing as far as forward-facing sonar, seeing them on the underwater camera this year. I know there's been some discussion as far as, getting a handle on bait fish populations on Mille Lacs, getting better data on yellow perch numbers, especially moving forward. And the same breath of having that, 2-fish harvest limit for walleyes. The DNR also came out about a week earlier and said that it'd be a 5-fish perch limit, at least up until May 9th. What was kind of the thought process there as far as collecting data on perch, or, where is the DNR, or from your perspective as the area supervisor, that regulation, as that came down, what was the thinking or mindset behind that?
Yeah. So we manage Mille Lacs Lake with eight different Ojibwe bands. So there's actually 5 species that we manage the lake with those bands with, and those species are walleye, yellow perch, northern pike, tulliby, and burbot. And some of those species we have set safe harvest levels for, and quotas between the state and the bands. So this year we ended up actually going over our perch quota by about 6,000 or 7,000 pounds. So at that point, we had to work with the tribes and figure out what to do about that. So we ended up knocking the limit back to 5, just so we could continue on having fishing throughout the season. But with the perch, we don't quite know exactly as much about their population as we do about the walleye. We have a lot of good netting numbers and a lot of good information on their age and growth, and what they eat and their size and things like that. But we really don't know much about their population size. We don't have a lot of great modeling data or population estimates. So that's one thing we're going to be looking at in the future. We've already formed kind of an internal perch research committee to look into the the data a little bit more to maybe see how we can, get more understanding of that population and, try to get maybe a little bit better idea what an ideal safe harvest level would be for the perch.
Sure.
So more to come on that. But that's kind of what happened from our perspective here.
Sure. And I don't think, even myself as a guide and an angler, I don't think I could have predicted what happened this winter as far as the population of perch. First of all, I knew that we had good perch numbers just based on, the last few winters of me being out there and bumping into a few of them in the summer. But I had no idea, to be honest with you, that the numbers were that good. And nor did I have an idea that we would get droves of anglers specifically targeting the perch the way we did this winter. And I think a lot of it had to do with a slower walleye bite, but also a lot of people wanted to experience those great big Mille Lacs perch for the first time. Some of them probably ever. There's obviously anglers that can remember good perch bites 10, 15 years ago, like myself. But I know there was a lot of anglers that I took out fishing and that came out through the resort that had never seen perch like that and of that size or caliber on Mille Lacs Lake or a lot of other lakes.
Yeah, no, it was definitely great. It was a great ice fishing season. The ice set up well. People could get around good. The road systems were good, and yeah, people found the perch, which was great. It attracted a lot of people up here. People were excited about it, and hopefully we can see more of that going forward, and hopefully we can learn some more about their populations, and and then we can adjust safe harvest levels and limits, as we see fit, because we do want people to come up here and enjoy that resource for sure. But yeah, definitely great winter on the lake.
Yeah, and I hope it wasn't just a blip on the radar. I truly hope that, we've got sustainable perch populations for many days to come here because or many years to come, because I enjoy perch fishing in the winter. It was a staple for me as a guide. I mean, I grew a business on Mille Lacs Lake where I'd fish walleyes in the morning, fish perch during the day, and then go back walleye fishing all winter long. I mean, that's what I did on Mille Lacs, and if you think back 10, 15, almost 20 years ago, when the bait fish numbers were more stable, you could catch walleyes in the morning. You'd catch a few during the day, but you'd catch some jumbo perch, some tullabies, and then you go back out walleye fishing in the evening. It would make for a fantastic day. My customers were happy. We've got people from all over the Midwest that would come to Mille Lacs Lake ice fishing, and that was a typical day for me. And then you fast forward into summer. I didn't really target perch. I was mainly walleye fishing. And the bass came online where, you had popularity. I always say that for my career anyway, the smallmouth bass were always there. I would try to beg customers to go bass fishing. And a lot of people would be like, nah, bass, we have bass in our backyard. And then I would hook them. I'd bring them into the rocks and get them a 19, 20, 21-inch smallmouth. And they'd be like, hey, let's bass fish the rest of the day because they saw the size of the fish. And so that's what I love about Mille Lacs Lake is that big fish potential. You got big walleyes, big bass, big pike, and now big perch that are reemerging. It's great to see. Greg, one last thing I want to touch on just because it's still open. I don't know how much longer we're going to have ice, but this extended pike season, I know some people are taking advantage of it. I talked to some anglers. I've seen social media posts of people posting giant pike online out in Mille Lacs. That's great to see because I love big pike. There's not a lot of places in Minnesota that you can go and catch big pike. Are you seeing some anglers out there? What are you guys seeing as far as people taking advantage of these new pike regs?
Yeah. I've been getting some calls and some emails about the pike. So there's definitely people out there. We still have a late ice season creel going on out there, and that'll go on, basically until people can't get out fishing anymore. And those guys have been running into a few anglers that are catching some nice pike out there. There hasn't been a ton of people out there. So the folks that have been out there have kind of had a lot of space to themselves to move around and things. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Mille Lacs has a very healthy pike population. The size structure is very desirable, and I think it's really cool that it's one of the only places in the state where you can fish pike through the month of March. So it gives those guys that like to fish with tip ups and stuff like that as they stage out in front of spawning areas some opportunity to do that. So yeah, there's definitely some folks getting in on the last week or two of ice pike fishing.
Well, I hope moving forward as we get into open water here and as we get, just the season underway, I'm really pumped about the regulation, especially that 17 to 20. Those are the fish that, my customers or my clientele like to keep. That's a
Mm-hmm.
perfect size range, and that's 17 to 20. Yes, you can harvest 1/20. But what I like about Mille Lacs Lake as an angler is the fact that there are a lot of big fish opportunities out there for pike, for bass, for walleyes, for perch. I like the fact that you can harvest a couple this year if you want. I know some bass anglers that come up to Mille Lacs that have been coming out fishing with me for the past few seasons, and they're going to love the chance to keep one or two walleyes. They're not filling freezers, so a couple walleyes that they can bring into a resort and have fried up, or bring them back to their cabin or VRBO to fry them up. They're going to be excited about that. I think you're going to have a reemergence of anglers, like I said, that are coming back to Mille Lacs for opener
Mm-hmm.
in that May, June, July time period. Maybe they want to come up with their kids and experience Mille Lacs Lake. I think the lake is really healthy right now. I think we're moving in the right direction. Hopefully, we're getting to a point where things are starting to get stable. On those same lines, I would love to see stable regulation moving forward, where we're not having to change slot limits around and changing limits. And we're getting back to a place where we can harvest a couple and then still enjoy those big fish and the big fish potential that we have on Mille Lacs Lake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, stable regulations is definitely one of our goals if we can, if the population allows us to do that. Yeah, it's definitely a lot easier when you don't have to be changing things around all the time for sure. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean the walleye, the pike, the perch. I mean, just a lot of opportunities for anglers out there for sure. So I'm looking forward to this open water season too. Yeah.
Well, Greg, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm sure I'll lean on you more. I know it's a tough task when you're managing a lake the size of Mille Lacs Lake, and the variables and the angling hours versus, the allowable harvest, and what's agreed with the bands, what's not. So, Greg, thanks for coming on and sharing some insight. I really appreciate it. I know our listeners appreciate it. I'm sure I'll see you on the lake this summer. Look forward to seeing you in the meetings. Greg Berg of the Minnesota DNR, Mille Lacs area supervisor. Greg, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tony. Anytime. Always appreciate our conversations and looking forward to the next one.
All right. Have a great spring.
Yep, same to you.
Stay tuned. We've got more Dialed In Angling coming your way. The Dialed In Angling podcast is brought to you by St. Croix Rods, handcrafting the best rods on earth for an elevated angling experience since 1948. St. Croix Rods are truly a world-class brand that has earned the respect and admirations of anglers across the planet. I trust St. Croix Rods, and you should too. Check them out at stcroixrods.com.
An unexpected fall into cold water can turn tragic in almost an instant, even for the best of swimmers. As the weather warms up and the ice thaws, make sure you get home safe by always wearing a life jacket and ice picks when recreating on cold water. If you fall in, put your arms on the ice, kick your feet, and roll away from the hole. The best plan is to always go with a buddy and let someone know when you will return. Safety is always in season. A message from the Minnesota DNR.
OnX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Download the app today to get fisheries information in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin.
along with research tools for serious anglers and beginners alike. Filter lakes by species, trophy only, keeper fish, abundance, or all of the above. Plan which lakes to fish with the app, navigate to the accesses, and once you're there, use the onX best-in-class weather imagery and fishing hotspots to catch more fish. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you would never known existed. onX Fish, the app that is changing the game on ice.
Once again, big thanks to Greg Berg of the Minnesota DNR for jumping on the podcast with us. He's been on before. I've been out in the boat with Greg. He's a great guy. He's a real fishy guy, loves to fish and loves being in the outdoors. So appreciate him being on the podcast. And just to clarify, so you know the regulations for yourself, the Mille Lacs regulations for this summer, at least until November 30th. Walleye 17 to 20. It's a 2-fish limit. You can have 1 over 20. So that's a 2-fish limit, either 2 under or 1 over 1 under. Also, that perch regulation of 5 fish is going to stick until at least November 30th. So if you're out there this summer, you can harvest a few walleyes. If you bump into a couple perch, you can keep up to 5. Now, possession limit and daily limit are the same. So 2 walleyes, 5 perch. Just wanted to clarify that. This is a step in the right direction. I've been on the Mille Lacs fishery input groups in the past, and then I've been on MILFAC, the Mille Lacs Fishery Advisory Committee, and it's nice to see. It seems like the last 10 years we've been kind of in this holding pattern. Regulations go up and down, and closures and all of the above have occurred over the last 10 years. And to see a 2-fish limit in place all summer is a step in the right direction, in my opinion. Even on the press release, Brad Parsons, it states the walleye population in Mille Lacs is currently in a good place. I've felt that for a while now, and now seeing all the young of the year walleyes in the lake, seeing all the perch, the Cisco's, everything seems to be healthy in Mille Lacs once again. I hope this trend continues. Mille Lacs gets a lot of press, especially the last decade, as far as negative press, shutdowns, closures. We're moving away from that, I'm hoping. I not just love Mille Lacs because I've fished it my whole life. I love Minnesota fishing. I think we have some of the greatest resources in the Midwest. Lakes like Mille Lacs, Winnie, Leech, Vermilion, Lake of the Woods. I want to see all these lakes flourish. I want to see people enjoying these fisheries. I've said it in the past. I've always been one that kind of, leans towards being a little bit conservative as far as harvest regulations. And definitely I'm all for slot limits. I've seen slot limits my entire life, starting with Mille Lacs when I was a kid, and seeing how slot limits have positively impacted fisheries from Mille Lacs to Leech to Winnie. I'm all for it. And so seeing this regulation come down, I'm hoping that this is the step in the right direction as far as, just being sustainable over the next few years, that we can stay at this 2-fish, maybe even get to a 3-fish limit. Not sure. Only time will tell. We'll see how it kind of shakes out this summer, what happens this summer as far as harvest, as far as the amount of people that fish Mille Lacs Lake. Either way, I think it's really good news. On that same discussion point, I look, at the beginning of the season when I get my license, I'm almost always grab a regulation book, or I'll look online. I'm always looking up different regs online, or I'm referring to my onX Fish app as far as checking special regulations lake. So on to the next discussion. I want to talk a little bit about different Minnesota fishing regs, regulations, things that are part of our state as far as, how laws and regulations are set. For example, new regs for 2025. Every year it seems like new regulations come out for different lakes, whether it's adding special regulation lakes or it's just changing regulations on current limits set, what have you. It's always something. I almost always every year either pick up a booklet or just go online to the Minnesota DNR website, and I'll just kind of scroll through some of the new regs. A couple things that stood out for me: new regulations as far as limits are concerned. Yellow bass is 30, Tulabee Cisco whitefish is 15. So that's sort of interesting. That's really knocked down. But the biggest headline in that is burbot. I see burbot at 4 fish. Lakes like Mille, they set a regulation of no harvest for burbot. I think last year. Now you're seeing 4 fish across the state. I know burbot fishing has become really popular, especially over the last 5 years. I love fishing burbot, eel pout, same thing. I love burbot fishing. I've always loved catching burbot. They were the fish for me that, when the walleyes weren't biting, or you'd set up in this prime walleye spot, whether it was on Mille or Winnie or Leech, and you think, oh, that's a really nice break, and it flattens out here. The walleye's going to be here in the evening. You get that, half hour, 45-minute window. You might catch a walleye, but guess what? You caught a lot of burbot. And so even as a kid, I enjoyed catching burbot, but seeing stacks of burbot and people treating fish like burbot and just throwing them all over the ice, I'm glad that those days are behind us, because they truly are a fish that's fun to catch, first of all. I'd like to see them back in big numbers. And I've talked to a lot of biologists that say if you have healthy burbot numbers in the lake, that means the lake itself is healthy. They help balance out, perch populations. They help balance out the lake. They're a cool fish. A lot is unknown about the burbot. They do spawn this time of year. So late February, March is kind of that spawn timing, right in there, but you can catch them pretty much all winter. And then in the summer, they sort of go dormant. They're a cold water fish. They're a freshwater cod. So enjoying that burbot fishing for years to come. I like where the DNR went with a 4 fish limit. I've harvested a few burbot in the last few years just because, I forgot what it tasted like. It's been at least a decade prior to that I had kept a burbot and cleaned one and fried one up or cooked one up. So just in the last few years, I've kept a few smaller burbot, caught them on Winnie. I caught one on Leech, and they're fantastic table fare. I've just cooked them. I baked them with a little bit of butter and garlic salt in a pan, and they're fantastic. I think you can bake them. People boil them. I've also fried it. Excellent. Sort of take out that little back strap and that tail piece. Fantastic. But I like where we're going with that, especially as burbot fishing gets more popular. I think it's important to, set a regulation that's current to the time. So, it seems like oftentimes it takes forever to get regulations changed, to get laws changed, and to see this burbot at 4, I'm pretty excited about it. Some other notable dates that I noticed: shelters have to be off as of March 14th. So, if you're listening to the podcast, and I'm talking shelters up in northern Minnesota. So north of Highway 200 had to be off as of last weekend. I think most people got them off well before that. This warm up that we had a week ago, I think got people, moving their shelters. So some other notable dates, obviously, inland walleye fishing May 10th starts. Muskie June 7th. Stream trout fishing starts April 12th. All sort of notable dates that I'm looking forward to. I have totally turned the page, and I'm really kind of laser focused on open water now. I've put a lot of my Markham batteries away. I put a lot of my Strike Master batteries away, a lot of my ice fishing stuff in general, and I'm focusing on open water. I really, getting back to some of these dates, I really want to see some regulation change as far as opening bass fishing, for example, before the opener, so that when the ice goes out, we can enjoy bass fishing like other states. Wisconsin currently has it as a law now. Folks in Wisconsin can enjoy going out bass fishing right after ice out. I love catching bass in the spring. I think anybody listening that does a little crappie fishing in the spring, that catches largemouth bass, knows that it can be phenomenal. Those fish are sliding into warm water right after ice out. I think it would be great for the state, not just for, something to do as an angler, but also it'd be great for the industry as a whole, being able to sell tackle and people getting excited about that part of our state would be huge. And I'll get into some other regulation changes that I would like to see. But I do want to cover, a few items that I noticed in the regs that, are different for this year. Like, for example, the experimental regulations that we talked about. 2 podcasts ago, I had Mike Hayner. Mike Hayner does a lot with the panfish groups. And I noticed that there's a bunch of new special regulation lakes, especially in Otter Tail County. Now, I'm all for some of these special regulation lakes, experimental regulations, whatever you want to call them. But I did note that there's some real major ones, especially in Otter Tail County, like Big and Little Pine. They're going to a 5-fish crappie limit. I did notice like Star Lake went to a 5-fish crappie limit. West Battle went to a 5-fish crappie limit. So I love fishing in Otter Tail County. If you've ever fished in that area, it's special in the sense that there's 1,000 lakes in the county. There's great walleye fishing. There's fantastic pan fishing. And to preserve some of those lakes in that county, I think that's a really good step in the right direction. So if you want a full list of the new special regulation lakes, check out the Minnesota DNR booklet, or else go online to the Minnesota DNR fishing regs 2025. But I found interesting too in the reg books, I always read the regs like every year, like I said, when they come out or they post them, there's certain things that I want to see for new regulations, but also, just some interesting facts that I think I'd like to cover. I just find it intriguing, like for example, the new invasive list that they've got listed, it's on page 15. You can check it out. And of course, rusty crayfish is on there. We knew that. Spiny water fleas, faucet snails, starry stonewort, zebra mussels, gobies, Eurasian milfoil, all those I'm familiar with, but New Zealand mud snail. I guess I had no idea that the New Zealand mud snail was on this list. Don't even know what it is, but obviously it came from a fish tank or in a ballast in a ship. I'm not sure how it got here, but it's on the list. Round goby, big head carp, silver carp, and roughies. So I'm a huge fan of clean drain dry. I don't want to see starry stonewort in any lakes. I don't want to see faucet snails. Definitely don't want to see zebes, and do not want to see New Zealand mud snails. It's interesting. That's why I read the regs every year, because I had no idea that New Zealand mud snails were on that list, but they're here. Apparently, I'm not sure in what bodies of water. You can take a look at the AIS reports from the DNR if you're interested in that. I know as a person that spends a lot of time on different bodies of water, I'm very conscious not to go from one AIS lake to a lake that, say, doesn't have AIS. And I'm very conscious of washing out my live well, spraying down my boat all the time. I'm in lakes a lot like Mille, Leech, Winnie. They all have invasives. And I don't want to go to a small lake and, carry that stuff or be the one that transports that to a lake. So being conscious of that, I think a lot more people are definitely conscious of it as anglers, as sportsmen. It's top priority on our list to keep our waters safe and clean. Also, some notable things I noticed in as far as licensing. If you haven't gotten your license, March 1st, you needed to get a new fishing license for the year. I always get the sports license, right? It used to be formerly the sportsman's license. Now it's the sports license. That's an angling and small game. I guess I had no idea that you could get a super sport license. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that are probably like, it's been around for years. What the super sport license includes is an individual angling license, a trout and salmon stamp, small game, including pheasant, waterfall stamps, a deer license, which includes archery, firearms, or muzzle loaders. So for $100, you can get that license for the year. for residents. It's interesting. I guess I know they had something similar in the past. I thought it went away, but it looks like it's definitely back here. So if you're interested in a super sport license, that is an option. One thing I noticed in licensing too is the state of Minnesota has a conservation license for residents only. And what a conservation license, if you go to Canada, I know a lot of anglers are familiar with Canadian conservation licenses. It's a reduced fee for a license, but also it's reduced bag limits. So let's say the walleye, like right now, the current walleye limit in Minnesota is 6. You could have 3. And for a lot of people that don't eat fish or, maybe don't need 6 walleyes or don't care to keep 6 walleyes or keep a full limit of any fish, a conservation license would be for you. And it's great that we have it for residents, but I guess I just want to ask the DNR, like, or someone at the DNR, like, why don't we have it for non-residents? I think a lot of people that may come and fish for the day would be interested in a conservation license versus a full license. I know a lot of my customer base, some of them don't even eat fish. Some that do maybe only want a couple for a fish fry. So it might be something intriguing, for the state. I don't know if it just comes down to dollars. I know in our state, as far as the state of Minnesota, licensing is actually pretty cheap compared to other states. I fish a lot of other states, and buying a 1, 2, a 1 or a 3-day license or even a year license as a non-resident is pretty cost effective. It's really reasonable, and so maybe it just comes down to something as simple as that. Possession limits. I want to touch a little bit on possession, maybe not just the possession limits. I know a lot of possession limits are the same as daily limits, except for a few different species. You'll have to read up on each species to find out, what possession limits are. But what I wanted to touch on for like ice fishing or even shore lunch, I don't know if a lot of people know this. This probably applies to more people when it comes to ice fishing, because I know a lot of people that ice fish for a full weekend out in their wheelhouse, and they're not exactly sure what to do with fish as far as cleaning it. Here's a couple simple facts that I've highlighted from the DNR booklet. And I think it's something that you should know, because I know people, especially on a lake like Mille or Winnie, that have gotten ticketed for not having a carcass of a fish. So unless you're in the act of preparing a meal, any kept fish of any size restrictions different than the statewide regulations may not be filleted. Okay. Kept fish must have their heads, their tail fins, their skin intact, and can be measured and counted. So what that's saying is, like, if you have a walleye and let's say there's a slot limit on Mille Lacs, for example, right? If you have a cleaned fish, you're not supposed to have that unless you're frying it currently at that minute or you've already fried it. And if you have to keep that carcass in full tact so the DNR can legally measure that fish. Like, you can't just be out in your fish house filleting fish and then have dispose of the guts and just have the fillets there. You could actually be ticketed for that. So I think that's important for people to know. Also, fish other than bullheads, sunfish, crappie, you have to you could fillet those without having a skin patch on there. The rest of the fish have to have a skin patch. But a walleye, for example, you have to leave that intact unless you're frying it on the ice or you're doing a shore lunch. And even if you do, you've got to bring the carcass to shore, and it counts as your daily limit. So keeping that in mind, I know there's a lot of questions. I get asked that by customers too. I set wheelhouses in the winter, and people ask, hey, if I clean fish out here, what do I do? Do I run the carcasses to shore? No, you need to keep them intact. I usually tell them freeze them flat, so you're not getting into a situation where you're going to get a ticket. So just some interesting facts that I just went through the booklet quickly. Again, check some of those special regulation lakes. They've added a whole list of them to the long list that's currently there. I want to get back to some laws that I would like to see changed moving forward. Everybody has varying opinions on these different laws, but I I guess me personally as an angler, this is just my opinion, what I would like to see in the state. And let's start with one, the 2-rod rule. I don't know why we don't have a 2-rod rule in Minnesota. The states around us have 2-rod rules. You can go to Wisconsin, you can go to the North Dakota, South Dakota, use multiple lines. In Minnesota, in the summer, you can only use one line. I would like to see that changed, I think, for various reasons. One, if you're trolling by yourself, I know a lot of people love trolling. It'd be nice to have 2 lines. Experimenting with baits, it'd be nice to have 2 lines. Even now with forward-facing sonar, if you're bobber fishing or something, it would be nice to have 2 lines with kids out there on the boat. There's times where you just can't fish 2 lines, where you're casting constantly. Let's say you're casting for bass or pike or even walleyes, and it's rough, windy, whatever the situation. There's a lot of times where anglers won't be using 2 lines. But there are times like on the river, trolling, where a 2-rod rule or a 2-line rule would be super nice. And it would sell a lot of product. It'd be great for business. Even if the state added like a stamp where you could buy a 2-line stamp, I think it would generate some revenue. I know it's been in the talks for years. It's gotten shot down. It's brought back up. It's shot down. I'm not exactly sure. Me personally, I would like to see the 2-line rule or the 2-rod rule. Next, I've already stated conservation licenses for non-residents. I think it would be a great idea. Moving forward, I know a lot of people that don't really care about keeping fish or they don't eat fish, so why not have a conservation license? It sends the right message. A lot of people would be all for it. I think that'd be something that could easily pass. Limits, setting limit restrictions for walleyes in particular. Now, this is a hot topic among a lot of anglers, whether we should go to a 4-fish limit or keep it 6. Okay, a lot of people say keep it 6, that way it keeps a lot of people coming into Minnesota because we can keep 6 fish. A lot of out-of-state traffic, a lot of non-residents would come here because it's 6 fish versus, let's say, North Dakota's 5, or you go to Canada, it's 4. I myself would like to see a 4-fish limit. I really would. I think today's angler with forward-facing sonar, with the technology that we have, the step in the right direction would be 4 fish. We've had 6 fish on the books for a long time, well over 4 decades, I believe. And so seeing a 4-fish limit, I think, is the right thing to do. Minnesota state law, you can have 1 over 20, the rest under, or all 6 under 20. I would like to see a 4-fish limit. I know me personally, I'm a family person. I love fishing with my family. We don't need 6 walleyes a piece. We really don't. I mean, even I'm fortunate enough to get to fish all the time, so I get to have fish fries whenever I want, and so I get to fish a lot. I get that, and I know a lot of people out there that only maybe fish once a year might argue that we need a 6-fish limit, but the amount of anglers that are on the lake that are super sophisticated anglers, even ones that are just good anglers, forward-facing aside, there's a lot of good anglers in this state. And I think to keep healthy populations of fish, like I talked about in the beginning, lakes like Mille, Leech, Winnie, Vermilion, I think a 4-fish limit is warranted. I look at Leech Lake, for example, and Leech Lake has been a 4-fish limit for quite some time now. And you can have 1 over 20, the rest under 20, or all under 20. I think it's a good slot limit for that lake, and I think a 4-fish limit is healthy for that lake. I've watched the walleye populations on Leech Lake continue to get stronger. It seems like a lot of people go there. It doesn't seem to drive any customers away, that's for sure. When you drive through Walker in the summer, it's bustling with people, with tourism, with tourists, tons of people fishing the lake. I think a 4-fish limit is where we need to be. Now, again, that's my personal opinion. I know there's people that are out there that are saying that maybe own a resort or something that may have a varying opinion, and I respect your opinion. I'm just stating, for me personally, I would love to see a 4-fish limit. Now, if you're an angler that's super interested in regulations in Minnesota or just fish talk, the Angler Summit in Grand Rapids is March 27th. Okay, you have to RSVP. You can go to Okay, go to the MNFish website, look up the Angler Summit. It's coming up March 27th, 2025. I know Brad Parsons from the DNR will be up there. They're going to be discussing things like I just talked about: 4 fish limits, reducing bag limits, 2 rod rules. It's an all-day summit. It looks like a great event. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend this year. I've got some other obligations that week. But if you're interested, I think it's a great way to voice your opinion, to also meet other anglers, people that may have the same opinions as you. The Angler Summit put on by MNFish. There's going to be a lot of people from the DNR. There's going to be a lot of other anglers there. I know it's going to be packed, so you're going to want to RSVP for that event. But if you're interested, March 27th up in Grand Rapids, check it out. That's all I've got for you. Another notable date where I'll be at, March 29th, Rapid Marine, Sauk Rapids, outside of St. Cloud. They've got a big open house. I'm doing some seminars. I know there'll be a lot of other speakers there. I am totally shifting towards open water. Tune in each and every week to the podcast. I'm going to have a lot more open water content as far as fishing reports. I want to get some other anglers on. My Facebook and Instagram feed, my social media is already blown up with people fishing open water out in Chamberlain. I'm seeing ice in Green Bay start to deteriorate. Those guys are starting to get out there. Definitely the river in Red Wing. I'm already seeing people asking, is Birchdale open up in Rainy? So we're getting there. We are getting closer to open water. Me as an angler, I couldn't be more excited. I love spring. That's what I love about living in Minnesota, in the Midwest, is the season changes. As much as I love ice fishing, I love open water. And then as the season progresses, late summer, I can't wait for fall fishing. And then you get into fall fishing, and then you can't wait for winter again. I am the type of angler that looks forward to each and every season, and then I look forward to the next season. I had a great ice season. I can't wait to put that to bed and launch my new boat and get out there and start crappie fishing and doing things that I love. That's why I want to see a bass season, a spring bass season where you can go out and not harvest bass, but just catch a few and release them. I don't see any harm in catching fish in shallow water and then releasing them and enjoying a resource that we have, just like every other state. I'm so jealous of like North Dakota, for example, or South Dakota, where their season doesn't close. Or Wisconsin, they have an open bass season. I see all these people posting pictures of catching bass, and we can't do that in Minnesota. So I'd love to see that law changed. If you're excited about stuff like that, make sure you're checking out the MNFish Angler Summit up in Grand Rapids, March 27th. That's all I've got for you this week. Next week, like I said, stay tuned. I'll have some open water content, a lot of fishing reports. Thanks for tuning in to the Dialed In Angling podcast each and every week. I'm your host, Tony Roach. Until next time, good luck fishing.